I'm literally looking at myself at the moment.
Time is unfaithful for those
Teacher,
who
I'm
abuse
literally
it.
looking at myself at the moment.
Time is unfaithful for
Teacher,
those who
I'm
abuse
literally
it.
looking at myself at the
The
moment.
lotto is not gambling. The lotto is a tradition. It's an Italian tradition.
Teacher?
Hello, and welcome to another episode of It's Time to Rewind, a podcast stuck in its own time loop right along with the movies we discuss. In this season, we're taking a look at Triangle Time Loop. I am your host, Bubbawheat from Flights, Tights, and Movie Nights, and in this episode we are discussing the third loop in Time Loop that starts at 43 minutes and 55 seconds with a view of the countryside and Ricky 2 running off, and ends at 59 minutes and 18 seconds, with Ricky going once more into the time machine. Joining me today is my guest, Alice Lauren. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm good. How are you? I'm
doing pretty good as well. It's good to have you back.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem. And, I'm almost positive that this is your first experience with Time Loop. So before we get into the specific loop, why don't you take a minute and talk about, what you thought about this movie as a whole?
Oh, geez, as a whole. Yeah, I mean, I think, what I'd heard, and I know someone had posted in the Facebook group that we know each other from, that it was this, Italian movie with, bad dialogue, but an interesting kind of concept of the time loop. And when I started watching it, I really could feel that. At first I was scared. It said it was Italian. I'm like, oh my gosh, is this whole movie in Italian? I didn't know what I was getting into. But it was okay. It's not a rewatchable movie by any means. I mean, I'm very much confused about it. There's a lot that I really don't know. I feel like you're going to have to explain to me.
I do agree that I think the one failing of this is with the non-American actors or the non-English speaking actors, it does make the exposition hard to follow. And so unless you're kind of more steeped in this kind of movie, it can be harder to follow, for sure.
That, I mean, and the science of the whole thing, I'm not quite sure what they were writing on the paper, like with their markers and everything, trying to figure out. That everything really blew my mind. I was really here to see this baby pig, that was that was the highlight for me. But yeah, I mean, it was okay. It got a little bit better as it went along, but definitely not very rewatchable. Not the greatest line readings. I mean, sometimes it is because of like language barrier. You have what looks like an Italian actor trying to speak English. Sometimes that kind of comes out a bit weird, to an American ear. But
yeah, I mean, there's really only three main actors. We have Ricky, who's British, and I think he does a pretty good job of centering the whole film. And then we have his father, Riccardo, who's Italian, and he's difficult because he has a lot of exposition, and so his accent makes it hard to follow some of that exposition. And then we have the French doctor, and she is just kind of like the outside observer.
So is Ricky not Italian? That's what I was trying to figure out. This, as it says in the synopsis, that it's this Londoner, and then his father is Italian. And I understand. I mean, I am a daughter of immigrants. I understand, your parents maybe having a thicker accent than you, especially if you're, born in a different country. But it was a little bit confusing. Like, really? That's his father? I don't know. I was a little confused.
Yeah, I get the impression they don't spend a ton of time, and, well, we'll actually talk about it a little bit because they do mention it in this loop. But Ricky and his mother, left a while ago because his father was too wrapped up in his research, and they moved to London. And I think it's safe to assume that his mother was probably British as well. So he gets his accent from his mother and from spending, a lot of his childhood probably in London.
Yeah, that makes more sense. There's not really a right way to look Italian, I guess. I get it, especially if it's like British and Italian parents, So, I can kind of forgive that. It only got more difficult to comprehend from there. So, hey.
Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and get into this loop, which this is the third loop. So we're going to be dealing with Ricky 3 for the most part. But I think it's interesting that this is the first loop that really starts off before Ricky 3 arrives. We get this moment seeing Ricky 2 run off and his father, telling him don't talk to anyone, and looking at the note written in French that's the warning about time travel. And I also think it's interesting that, like, the sound levels, the music is much louder than the dialogue. So it seems like we're not really intended to really hear the dialogue, so it makes us feel even more like an outside observer.
Oh yeah, the sound mixing was pretty awful here. Sometimes the French woman's lines, it was like suddenly they're in a warehouse sounding. It was some shoddy sound mixing here.
Yeah, I do think that the sound design is another place where the budget, the lower budget of this film really hampers the storytelling.
This was filmed in 2019. I'm trying to think this almost looks like it could be like a COVID film, especially it's, very much around, as much as possible, around this one shack of a house. And
yeah, it was mostly filmed in the one warehouse, and then it has a lot of these like drone shots of this like small Italian village, which I forget the name. I have it in my notes from the earlier episode, but it is a gorgeous little village in Italy.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely wish that there was more. This could have really been like a postcard for Italy.
Mm-hmm. And we see him with the note in his pocket, even though we never actually saw him pick it up in the earlier loops. But it was, I did go back and rewatch the scene with him and Ricky 2 talking about the pig. And then we get Ricky appearing once again. And he does look a little disoriented whenever he first comes out. I think that plays a little bit more in the last loop, but he doesn't seem too affected by this. And he goes and immediately draws, adds to this time travel diagram in green marker, giving his nice little stick figure rendition, the smiley face, giving us the timeline where he left at 7:15 and arrived at 6:05.
Mm-hmm.
Did that diagram help you understand what was going on at all?
So, even you saying that he left at this time and then he was, like, he's marking down the times he came in, because I did not understand what these numbers were. For some reason, I wasn't reading them as times. I was like, I was like, what unit of measure is this? I could not figure out this diagram, so now that makes a little bit more sense, that it's like, what time did he come back?
Yeah, each time he went into the time machine, or, whenever Chicha the pig went into the time machine, it sent them back exactly 65 minutes into the past.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Ricky 2, he went into the time machine at 7:15, and so Ricky 3 walked out of the time machine at 6:10.
Okay.
And then, the characters have 30 minutes before they send Chicha the pig back in time at 6:40. and that was the first thing to come through the time machine back at 5:35. So it does have like a pretty tight timeline. I still haven't. One thing that I might try to do for the next episode, or maybe for the last episode, is try and get like an exact timeline of all of these events, because it goes by pretty quickly, but I feel like the writer director does have this like mapped out, almost second by second when all of these events take place.
Yeah, because I was still trying to figure out. I know there was a scene where Ricky could like look up and see what like the winning lotto numbers are, but then how does Dad know what they are? Have they been trying over and over to get these winning lotto numbers? And they just kind of are painstakingly do it over and over. It's this whole thing just to win the lottery, the entire reason behind the time machine.
Yeah, and that's actually what the majority of this loop is about, is really about that discussion. And I mentioned this a little bit before we started recording, but that's something that I honestly, and I watched this 2 times, like 6 months apart, start to finish, and then watching it, and then I've been watching it just in chunks before recording each episode. And and after watching it 2 entire times, I seem to completely forget almost the entirety of this loop.
Yeah.
Because this really is them talking. This is like almost the exposition loop. It's the exposition loop, and it's the chicha loop.
Yeah, it's and the explanation loop about some more about the dad's character, and that he's not at the university. I mean, or never was at the university.
Yeah. And I think it's weird that after he writes on the diagram, Ricky seems to be hiding from his father, and he's like looking at his father and kind of hiding behind the wall as his father looks at the phone and starts writing the numbers down on this ribbon, which eventually goes around Chicha's neck that they send back in time.
Right.
And this is another thing that I just completely went over my head, and because they don't do a good job of showing it, because they really just show him writing the numbers down. And I always thought that it was like he was writing them down from memory, and they do talk about it a little bit, towards the end of this loop. But I always thought that it didn't make sense, because it's like, where's the start of this? Because he's writing the numbers down because the numbers came to him, because he sent the numbers back an hour in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a self-causing loop.
I mean, I'm mind blown by that sentence. I don't even.
But I do think that, like, we see him checking his phone right before he starts writing it down. So I think the timeline, like the way the time works, is this is after, or this is like right when the lotto numbers are actually being drawn. And so he's looking up the winning numbers on his phone so he can write the numbers down on the collar in order to send them back.
Yeah.
But again, I think this is kind of a failing of the filmmaking process, that they don't really show the audience that's just kind of, it's skipped over.
Yeah, how he knows, because I mean, if you sent me into a store, or even put on TV, here are the winning lottery numbers. If I didn't know to really pay attention to that, I wouldn't pay attention to that. If we're thinking like Ricky, in the first time, you wouldn't know to pay attention to that. So I'm just kind of like, how does he know? But then this is probably very modern, and you can just look him up on your phone. And yeah, that would have been better.
Yeah,
to kind of figure out.
And again, I feel like this lotto I feel like this is the payoff, the only payoff that we get for this whole lotto moment. We have like this 5-second celebration, with Ricardo asking, did it work? Did we win? And Ricky's like, yeah, we won. And then he's like, he starts getting excited and they jump around. Oh yeah, he gets the phone call. And this ties in with the previous 2 loops to where, Ricky 1 tries calling, but it's the busy signal. And then Ricky 2 calls and he tells his dad, yeah, I'm looking at myself right now.
Mm.
And I do like that little bit of continuity. And then we also get, Ricky goes and checks, I guess, Chicha 1 and sees that the ribbon is still on his collar and it does have the numbers written on the ribbon.
Mm.
And then we have this weird moment that, Ricardo the dad just throws a t-shirt at Ricky saying that he smells like chicha. And this is where we get the, I guess this is like the moment for the ladies because we get Ricky taking his shirt off.
Yeah.
And it also helps we get the wardrobe change because this is basically the explanation of why Ricky doesn't recognize seeing himself in the earlier loops because he's wearing a different shirt.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. That is weird not recognize yourself just because you're wearing a different shirt, but maybe.
Yeah. And then we get him showing the video that he shot in the first loop of the guitar player. And in the video you can see Dr. Dijou basically looking straight at him. And so this shows Ricky 3 that Dr. Dijou already knew about him at this point in time, even though he hadn't met her whenever he was recording the video. And then we get these first of these little glitchy flashbacks.
Wasn't he recording her to prove to himself? Like, he had met her, right? Maybe I'm just confusing which Ricky, but...
The video that he's showing is... he was just taking a video of the guitar player at the cafe.
Yeah.
He wasn't, like, trying to prove anything other than that. I think he shows the video to her, maybe, in the next loop.
Mm-hmm.
That might be the other place where it comes in.
Yeah.
And then we have this discussion between Ricky and his father about the dangers of time travel and how, his father said that he shouldn't have talked to anyone, specifically talking about Mario, the cafe owner and the one that checked the lottery numbers and passed out. And of course the father ends with it's not like I'm gonna die, and they have the long pause. And Ricky's like, yeah, it's okay, you've got an hour.
Right, yeah. Oh, man.
And yeah, I wrote in my notes that this conversation is one of the worst sound qualities moments, which makes it even more difficult to follow because they're really deep into exposition at this point. And so you got the bad sound quality on top of the father's accent. So I think that's really an extra reason why I kind of, I guess, tune out during this scene.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. I was trying to figure out, I don't even know if this is in this conversation. A lot of these conversations are so similar, but about turning off the time machine will basically obliterate all of them in some sense. That went way over my head. I was trying to figure that out too. Okay, just stop.
Yeah, Ricky 3 at this point, he's wanting to turn off the machine so that his father doesn't die.
Right,
and so
right.
they have this discussion where his father mentions, if they turn it off, then Ricky 2 and Ricky 1 won't go back in time to warn them in the first place. And they add another doodle to the diagram with the tombstone right before Ricky 2 goes back to become Ricky 3. And right before that, they also have this conversation that explains this familial relationship and the funding, where Ricardo says that he's not actually working for the university, and he's been paying for this experiment with his own money and digging himself into debt. And it's like supposed to be this big emotional scene.
Then I'm like, how are you eating? How are you anything? I mean, I guess this is a shack. You're not like paying rent, I guess, but like, how are you anything? You know what I mean? Like, what do you mean you're paying with your loans and your savings and then you're in debt? Like, where's the debt collector, coming back in each time loop? I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, and he also gives the explanation that the whole time machine part was an accident, and basically that this is kind of a failure, like this is like a non-starter for any sort of success, because the fact that it's a time machine and it's not what they were originally trying to accomplish with this, like, Tesla's theory about this ether, which is supposed to basically be unlimited free energy. It was what they were trying to do. And again, that's like a plot point that's easy to miss, because it's not explained very clearly.
Yeah, it's a bit dropped. Yeah.
And at the same time, the fact that it is a time machine, it's not something that they can go public with, because it's too dangerous. It's not something that they would want to give out, that they want to make known, because of what it could be used for. And so they kind of come to this decision together that, that this isn't going to make them any money. It's not going to further Ricky's career in the science community. And so that is their justification for using these lotto winnings to basically continue to fund this research, or just to like pay back their loans and put Ricky in a better position.
I mean, it's still amazing, but it's 65 minutes into the past, so I mean, it's not the, stereotypical kill Hitler or whatever, kind of, going back into the past or going into your future, kind of thing. So it's a little bit like, I mean, there's a lot you can do, with, continuing to go back 65 minutes, but I mean, you're still stuck. I mean, you're still stuck in a day. You're still, I mean, it's a mini Groundhog Day.
Yeah, there's only so much you can do in the course of 65 minutes.
Yeah.
But they do end up packing quite a bit of things into this
yeah.
film. So much so that it does feel like a lot of these threads just get lost in favor of everything else that's going on. It kind of feels like everything's pushing towards this potential death of Ricardo.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything else just kind of falls by the wayside. And they also have this discussion about the difference between decision and intention, because they even bring up Ricky's quote. His quote is, he says, "You're only sending these numbers back in time just because you receive them from the future. That doesn't make any sense. In fact, that's a paradox." That's like exactly what we were talking about. It's like, where does the idea for playing the lotto come from? It's like they get the idea from seeing the numbers, but it's like, where does that idea originate?
Yeah, it's like the laziest. I mean, it's a pretty cool idea, but it's kind of that laziest, like, what you would do, prove that you're a psychic, tell me the lottery numbers, it's just that kind of like, well, of course that's what you're gonna do, or you're gonna relive, hopefully a great hour over and over and over again, but I don't know.
Yeah, and I feel like this, it would almost be better if this film did go a little bit deeper into this discussion between decision and intention, because it's like the theory that they're presenting is that they had this need for funding, even though Ricky didn't know it at the time. His father did, and so the time machine basically facilitated their need for money by giving them these lotto numbers.
Yeah.
It's like a combination of their intentions, their desires, combined with fate or destiny.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, and Ricky doesn't seem to be super excited about it, about the lotto numbers anyway. I mean, he's surprised, but, as soon as Dad got very excited about it, I thought, oh, well, this could be a whole other, buddy comedy movie. Not in this sense, but like, they go to Vegas, like something crazy, like it could have been a funny movie, but nope.
Yeah, and we also have these like glitchy flashbacks of the things that already happened, even including a flashback that we saw just like not even 10 minutes ago at the beginning of this loop, with Ricardo writing the numbers on the collar, which I thought that was a weird choice to put in here. And Ricardo basically puts the burden of responsibility of this whole lottery scheme onto Ricky. And I think the interesting part about that is that every instance of the time machine being used, except for the first one whenever Ricardo pushes Ricky into the time machine, they're all done by Ricky.
And was that for sure the first time that he went in? I mean, that was something I was thinking about. I mean, also, like, was that pig always in the basket? Because the first time, like, they looked over and it was like, there's a pig over there. And then this time, the pig goes into the basket. I was trying to see kind of the inconsistency, sort of inconsistencies, or one time when I was like, oh, there's no wine on the table, something must have changed.
Yeah, whenever the pig appears, that's basically Chicha 2, and then I think Ricky 1 takes Chicha 2 to put him back in the pen where he sees Chicha 1, and then he brings Chicha 2 back and puts him in the crate.
Okay, yeah. So it's just, sometimes the pig appears here, and so, usually it'll end up in the crate, seems like.
And then the crate is tall enough that you don't actually see Chicha unless you have like a high angle shot where it's intentionally showing Chicha. So anytime we see the crate, the pig could potentially be inside there. We just don't see it because you can't see through the crate.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And then we have, yet another paradox, a conversation about the paradox with the note, because Ricky does eventually, send Chicha back with the collar with the lottery numbers, and he pulls out the note and he's like, "See, it can change the future because I didn't send this note back with Chicha." And so he presents this theory that it's not a single timeline, and he actually created a parallel timeline. But he doesn't actually draw out the entire diagram. He just draws like a single line on the paper or on the whiteboard.
It's like they're looking for a sequel here, yeah.
But I do think that my favorite part about this specific loop all happens right at the end, and that is Ricky's final conversation, because he becomes so confident that he is able to change things in the past, or that he's able to change things in this alternate timeline, that he decides to go back, right after Chicha arrives, because he knows everything that happened, And so he thinks that he will be able to change everything that's happened. But he ends up causing everything to happen. And I just really love that disconnect between him being so confident that he can change things, even though he ends up
being the one that stole the Vespa, yeah.
Yeah. He ends up being the one that causes everything. He stole the Vespa. He's the one that kissed his girlfriend inside the shop. Well, kissed the woman that he wants to become his girlfriend.
Yeah.
And I'll talk about that more in the next episode. That's similar to this whole discussion with the lottery. It's like, intention versus decisions, because he wants her to become his girlfriend. And so throughout this time loop event, he ends up making that happen.
Yeah.
And we do get a few more shots of Chicha here. Before he sends him
favorite
back.
shot in the movie, yeah. Favorite shot in the movie is just her in the crate, yeah. And she just peeks up, and I'm like, what am I watching now? Babe in the City?
And then that's that's the end of the loop. He walks confidently into the time machine portal and disappears.
Yeah.
So that's basically this loop. It's the discussion about the lottery, time paradoxes, and the pig.
Yeah, and I don't know if this was suggested or this was just a theory that popped in my head, but I was like, wait a second, is Ricardo Ricky from the future? Because I think Ricardo was saying he's been, he had been, whatever, doing this for a while or something. There was a line in a different section, and I was like, wait a second. I wonder if, this is, Ricky, doing this, and then he grows up, and I don't know why. I know that's his dad, but for some reason, I had this theory.
It becomes a Fry situation from Futurama where he becomes his own grandfather.
That's true. Yeah, I know, but it was just, maybe it wasn't his father. I was waiting for oh no, I'm not your dad, I'm you from the future. Yeah. If we're gonna make big things, yeah.
And this is the shortest loop so far, and it's also the shortest time that Ricky has been in this loop, because the first time, he went back 65 minutes, and then Ricky 2 had the longest time, because he was there from 5:50 all the way to 7:15.
Mm-hmm.
And then this one he gets back at, he starts this loop at 6:10, and then they send Chicha back at 6:40, and then he goes back probably about, maybe 5 minutes later. So he was only here for 35 to 40 minutes. From 6:10 to 6:45 or 6:50. Because Ricky 1 goes back at 6:55, so that it probably is pretty short, just a few minutes after Chicha goes back, probably 6:45.
Mm-hmm. Who has the main clock? The dad? Because I feel let's say we're wearing a watch, does it change, time? Who's keeping time? I guess it's kind of a weird question, but.
Well, they have their phones, and so their phones sync up, which we had this discussion in an earlier episode, but I am curious what carrier Ricky has, because apparently at the same time there's basically 4 phones, and they're all connected to the same carrier, and they all get service.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, because I feel would it change? You could be holding your phone and the time will still be the same as it was when you left. It's kind of which clock is correct, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think in this point, because our phones, they sync their clock with the server. like the cellular server. So I think his phone would always show whatever the current time is.
Yeah.
Rather than, being like hours ahead, because he himself is basically several hours ahead.
Mhm. Yeah. That's true. I mean, you have a memory, so you know kind of like, oh, I just stepped through and now it's this time. So.
And I think we see it more just at the start of the next loop, but he's definitely getting tired by now because, for him, it's like, 7, 8, 9. For his body, it's probably close to like 11 o'clock at night, even though it's only 6:45.
Mm-hmm.
Which I suppose that's not too horrible, but considering he got knocked in the head a couple times, that probably causes some extra wear and tear. And he did run down to the city at least once, and back to the to this laboratory or this warehouse out in the country.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all I have for this loop. Is there anything else that you noticed or that you wanted to point out?
Kind of said everything. Yeah, no, I think we covered everything.
I think the only thing that I didn't mention is, like, right before he goes back into the time machine, we do see either Ricky 1 or Ricky 2 knock on the door. I think probably Ricky 1 knocking on the door, and Ricky 3 is like, oh, he can't see me.
Oh yeah, why can't he see him? Oh. Okay, he could see him. Like they could look straight at each other.
Yeah.
But he's like not supposed to. That's what it meant. Yeah, when they said he can't see me, I thought there was like something where like they were not physically able to see each other. But it really he basically meant like, oh no, he's not supposed to see me. I gotta go.
Yeah, because he remembers that would be Ricky 1, and Ricky 1 doesn't know about the time travel yet.
Yeah.
Because this is like 10 minutes, like 5 or 10 minutes before Ricky 1 goes back in time. So yeah, that was definitely Ricky 1 knocking at the door.
Yeah.
So I really do think that this film is like really tightly diagrammed.
Definitely.
It's just not, like, the script just needed a little bit more work.
Yeah,
in order to translate this like heavily diagrammed time loop scenario, in order to help translate it to the audience a little bit better.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a screenplay that shouldn't have become a movie until it was beefed up, for sure.
But thanks again for talking with me today, and for anybody else that hasn't heard you here before, why don't you go ahead and take a minute to let them know where they can find you online?
Sure. So I am someone who guests frequently on a lot of these kinds of movies by minute podcasts and other podcasts, but you can kind of definitely find me on the Movies by Minute podcast. My Twitter is podsocialite, and let's see. I mean, if anyone has Facebook still, hopefully everyone does. Alice Lauren, that's fine. Just message me, let me know where you heard me. Message me your time travel theories, I guess. I don't know. Hopefully I'll read them. My TikTok for any young ones and old ones that have TikTok out there is podcast socialite. So all pretty similar, but yeah, find me on there, and Twitter especially. You'll see kind of what podcasts I've guested on.
All right, and as always, I am Bubbawheat, and you can find me on Twitter at Bubbawheat. You can find this show, It's Time to Rewind, on Anchor.fm, as well as anywhere else that you listen to podcasts. We also have a Facebook group. It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group, and you can join that and discuss episodes as they come out, as well as have discussion about time loop movies, TV shows, anything out there, Taco Bell commercials. whatever, anything related to time loop discussion is welcome there. And, until next time, may you have some lucky numbers in your life.
I'm literally looking at myself at the moment.
Time is unfaithful for those
Teacher,
who
I'm
abuse
literally
it.
looking at myself at the moment.
Time is unfaithful for
Teacher,
those who
I'm
abuse
literally
it.
looking at myself at the
The
moment.
lotto is not gambling. The lotto is a tradition, is an Italian tradition.
Teacher,